Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wentworth Energy Challenge. It's so great to have you all here. My name is Joseph Schnackers. I'm the program coordinator for Accelerate, our innovation and entrepreneurship center here at Wentworth Institute of Technology. Generally, what we do is we specialize in helping bring your ideas to reality. Through our physical tools, equipment, one-on-one office hours, you name it, we're here to help make your dreams, whatever it is, come to life. But tonight, we're very excited to host our Energy Challenge and welcome our expert speaker in sustainability. Debbie Shepard is the principal and founder of Riverstone Sustainability, an environmental consulting company established in 2014 to help measure, manage, and report their clients' sustainability impacts. Debbie has worked with Wentworth since 2009 and is the co-chair of the Wentworth Sustainability Committee, whose goal is to provide leadership to the university and recommend actions it can take. To share with us her story and the details on Wentworth's current energy use, please help me welcome Debbie Shepard. Thank you so much.
Well, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right, good. Okay. I tend to have a soft-spoken voice, so if I trail off, just, wave your hand, okay? All right. Well, I'm very glad to see all of you here. This event is actually something that the Sustainability Committee has wanted to do for a really long time, because we always want to have student voice and student activities related to what we're doing behind the scenes on sustainability. All right, so for today, I'm going to try not to talk too much, but I was asked by Joe to talk a little bit about my journey into sustainability entrepreneurship, so I will start with that, and then from there we'll dive right into an overview of carbon and energy and the link between those two, which I bet many of you already know about. Then I'll give an overview of Wentworth's carbon footprint, talk a bit more about how we use energy on campus and where it comes from. And then, of course, we will shift gears and try to do some brainstorming and just, explore the challenge and what we're hoping to do as a group over the next week? Is that how long the competition goes? Thank you. Okay. All right. So starting with a really dorky picture in the upper left there, that's actually me as an undergrad in the Galapagos next to a giant Galapagos tortoise. So what's my background? I'm a huge environmental geek. I love to be out in the woods or on the beach and just studying all things related to nature. So how did I end up as a sustainability consultant? I wanted to translate that, love and passion for nature into something that other people cared about as well. So as I went on to my graduate education, I was trying to figure out a thesis topic, and my advisor at the time pointed out the fact that the word of the year was carbon neutral. So she said, can you make a building on campus carbon neutral? And that kind of set me on my whole career path, basically, from there. So I figured out how to do carbon accounting, which is, how you calculate carbon footprints. And then from there, ended up at a job at MIT, working in their environmental health and safety management program, and, started to do some grassroots sustainability work from there. Really found a passion there at the idea of trying to help organizations change to become more sustainable was something I was really excited about because I felt like it was a good fit for me. So that really led me to be a sustainability consultant, because at that time there really weren't sustainability offices or positions out there. That's changed since then. So what does a sustainability consultant do? In my firm, we help organizations to measure, manage, and report their sustainability impacts. So just some quick examples of what that might look like. There's some images here of a climate action plan that I helped a school to write. And then off to the right is a carbon footprint that I actually did of my hometown, working with the local municipality for their energy and climate program. The lower left is you might recognize that if you know anything about green buildings. So I do some lead consulting, helping organizations when they're constructing new buildings to make them as sustainable as possible. And then the other image in the lower right is the sustainability reporting. So working with corporations and other organizations that are trying to measure their sustainability impacts and share them with all of their stakeholders. So in the instance of a company, that might be a publicly traded company that has their investors and shareholders asking them really tough questions about what they're doing for environmental, social, and economic performance. So I'm sort of a jack of all trades sustainability person. I love the challenge and diversity of work that I do, and started my firm about 8 years ago, working with Wentworth as my first client, and it's just continued to succeed and grow since then. So I really love being an entrepreneur. If you have any interest in, taking a leap of faith and trying different things and wearing many hats, then I definitely recommend that path for you. All right, so carbon and energy, basics here. When you burn fossil fuels, it releases carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So that little picture of the Earth there with all the heat around it is basically like a heat-trapping blanket of greenhouse gases that warms up the planet and causes all sorts of environmental impacts, which we're starting to see every day. So this is something that you all may be familiar with, but climate change is really, probably the biggest environmental challenge, if not, one of the few that we face as a society, and the time is ticking. So we have, probably 10 years or so where we really have to tackle this issue. So one of the things that we always like to look for is, saving energy, but also trying to pursue renewable energy because it does not release greenhouse gas emissions. So that's considered a clean source. This is a very busy figure, but does anybody know what this is called? Have any of you ever seen one of these? No. Okay. So this is called a Sankey diagram, and it's basically showing energy flows, right? So this is all the energy use in a year for the United States in these giant units called quads, which is trillions of kilowatt hours of electricity per year. And the important thing to note, so the thickness of each of those lines represents how much of each fuel source is being used. So you can see petroleum, coal, natural gas, those are all fossil fuels. Those are still the main sources of energy that we use in the United States. Solar is up here. It's a little bit smaller, but it's growing. Hydro and wind, some other renewable sources there. What's interesting here too is kind of following the path of where the energy goes, right? So a lot of our fuel use is going to making electricity, which is makes the energy portable and easier for us to use. But what you'll see is this purple line here, that rejected energy, is kind of an interesting thing to think about. So when you're burning fuels, you're literally, burning that fuel, and there's a lot of waste heat that ends up just getting released to the atmosphere. So we're not even taking advantage of that. So all those purple lines, that rejected energy is just wasted energy that just gets released up into the atmosphere. So we have a long way to go in terms of really maximizing the efficiency, in terms of physics and engineering. How do we make these processes work better? So what does this mean in terms of individuals? So energy use per person, according to the US Department of Energy, energy use per capita, so per person per day, is about 2 gallons of oil, about 8 pounds of coal, 252 cubic feet of natural gas, and about 12 kilowatt hours of electricity per person. It's a lot of energy, and it's in everything that we do, right? So it's not only just like turning on the lights, but you go to the store to buy something and you think about all the energy and resources that went into the product and the packaging and shipping it and getting it to the store and getting it into your hands. There's a lot of what we call upstream embodied carbon that goes into just the economy and the way things work. So what does that mean in terms of Wentworth's environmental footprint? We talk about a greenhouse gas inventory or a carbon footprint. Those are used synonymously. And what you see here this is the 2019 greenhouse gas emissions for the campus. So a little more than half of our greenhouse gas emissions is from burning natural gas. So that's burning natural gas to heat buildings, heat water, to run the power plant, which has steam lines underneath, the quad out here, and actually heats most of the main academic buildings. The next biggest source is electricity use. So all of those things that we're plugging in throughout the day. So the lights, the computers, the laptop chargers, you name it. So there's plug load, there's lighting, there's mechanical equipment that helps to run the ventilation. You can just barely hear it in the room right now. So all those fans and pumps and motors, those all run on electricity. So basically the punchline here is that the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions is from burning energy to heat and cool buildings. So a lot of our focus on the committee has been working around buildings and trying to make them more efficient. There are other sources of emissions here too, so commuting. So if you're driving a car or even taking a train, we try to account for that portion of fuel use attributed to your trip to campus. So that's where the commuting comes in. And in a normal year, there will be some air travel as well. So again, we're kind of taking all those units of energy, multiplying them by an emission factor and converting it to greenhouse gas emissions. So it gives us this one sort of common unit that we can use across all these different energy sources to attribute the environmental impacts that are caused by our energy use. All right, so what does our emission trend look like over time? We've actually been calculating the campus carbon footprint since 2007. It started with a student project. The student green team actually approached the former president and asked her to sign something called the carbon commitment back in 2007, and that's what really kickstarted the whole sustainability program that we have on campus. So shout out to the green team. You guys are doing a great job. Has a long history of success on campus. So in terms of the emissions trend, what you see here, this dark red line, that's the natural gas. The yellow is the electricity. Some of these other sources on the top are what we call those scope 3 sources. So that's your travel and things that we don't have as much control over. You'll notice that it's relatively consistent except for 2020. Anybody have any ideas as to why? Yes, yeah, so there was less travel in 2020. A lot of the buildings were empty or shut down, right? So we weren't actually using as much energy on campus. Yes, yeah, so the other interesting, we haven't gotten into this, but we have a cogeneration plant on campus and the power plant. So what that does is it burns fossil fuels, it burns natural gas. It helps create the steam to heat the buildings, but it also produces electricity that we use on campus. So when most of the campus was empty, the cogen was still running and we were still producing electricity. So that's why you still see the natural gas is up there. And our electricity use was down, and actually it gets to a certain point where if we were to produce more than we use, it spins the meter backwards with the utility. So you actually get paid for any excess energy, which I think may never happen again because we have quite a bit of energy demand on campus, but 2020 was a very odd year. All right, so what have we done over the years on campus? I think one of the bragging rights that I always like to pull up is that the city of Boston has its own green building ordinance that requires LEED equivalent construction. That ordinance went into effect in 2007. Wentworth made a commitment in 2005 that it was going to do LEED silver equivalent for all of its construction. So Wentworth actually was ahead of the curve, ahead of that ordinance. And what we have to show now, which is sort of hidden in plain sight, the building that we're standing in now followed LEED version 4. It was LEED silver, almost gold. It was off by a point. And then some of the other projects, everything from 555 Huntington to the last renovation of Beatty Hall, the Ira Allen renovation, all of these spaces have been either renovated or constructed to LEED equivalent standards. You won't see a LEED plaque on any of the campus buildings, but we are following all those protocols. And we actually have to submit the same type of documentation to the city to prove that it meets LEED standards. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about the cogeneration plant that we have on campus. We also have a strategic energy management partnership with the utilities. So we work with National Grid, we work with Eversource. We've had a partnership with them for, I think, 4.5 years now at this point. It's been wonderful for creating that business case for sustainability on campus because anytime we pursue energy efficiency, it's saving the Institute money. And beyond that, we're getting these rebates that help offset the first cost of any of the projects that we go after. So that's going to be a theme here with the energy challenge, is trying to understand the trade-offs with some of these projects and making sure you have a good business case. We also purchase green power. So although you don't see a lot of renewables on campus, approximately 20% of our electricity is offset by wind power out in the Midwest. So we own the renewable energy certificates associated with that, and we get to deduct those emissions from our carbon footprint. All right, so getting to the heart of the issue here. So we talked a bit about energy use on campus already, but just to reiterate, natural gas is one of our biggest sources of energy that we use for space and water heating and to run the combined heat and power plant. You might hear me call that the CHP plant. Electricity for lighting, ventilation, air conditioning. As summers get hotter, we're going to be using air conditioning more, so that's driving up electricity use. And then plug load. So historically, plug load hasn't been that much of a building's energy use, but over time, as everybody gets more and more devices, so your laptops, your phones, your iPads, all of those things are getting plugged in and using more and more electricity. We also use a bit of diesel on campus, so we have a few backup generators for when the main grid goes down. If there's an emergency, we can keep some of those critical loads going. And then lastly, we do have a small solar array on the roof of the building here, so our first renewable energy installation on the campus. All right, so just to kind of orient you, everybody knows the campus map here. If you're going to be looking at building scale solutions as part of the challenge, I just wanted you to be a little bit familiar with how it works. So I mentioned the power plant, that star right there, that's actually where the power plant is. So that power plant is feeding electricity and steam to all those buildings in red. The residence halls are mostly independently metered, so we have all of this data as well. If you want to look at the buildings and look at gas use or electricity use by month or by year, we have all of that. So just reach out to us and we can give that to you. Ira Allen is independent. The annex complex is sort of treated as a complex, so there is some shared metering across those buildings, but they're similar enough that you can use that data effectively. I'll just kind of skim through this. This is natural gas use over time. The one blip for 2019, that's when the cogeneration plant was brought back online after being offline for, I think it was like 2.5, 3 years. It was actually broken down and we repaired it, but it did bump up gas use. Electricity, so you see electricity use is slowly creeping up and then it starts to go down when the cogen plant was running. That's because we're producing more electricity than we're buying from the grid. That's where that downward trend comes from. And then lastly, how does this all fit together? So I kind of shared that figure showing all the buildings that have been constructed to lead practices, but the reality is when you add a new building, like a science center, which is very energy intensive, it goes against what we're trying to do in terms of reducing our emissions. But what I like to point out, so in this particular graph, the bars are the total greenhouse gas emissions, and then the line is the square footage of buildings on campus. So up until 2019, you can see it's the square footage starts to go up because we added the apartments at 525. Ira Allen became more of a laboratory space. This building came online. All of those buildings added energy load to the campus profile, but the emissions didn't match that trend. The emissions started to go in the other direction, even though the square footage went up. And that is attributed to the green building practices that we've put into place, and also all the efficiency work that's happening behind the scenes. So there was LED lighting installed in all the residence halls over the last few months, for instance. A lot of pumps and motors have been swapped out to be more energy efficient. So there's all these things that have been happening with the facilities team that you don't always get to see it in the data. So I just kind of wanted to point out that's how we've been approaching it. So what does this mean in the regional context? I think this is also really helpful to understand that Boston is really at the forefront of climate action. So they have their own climate action plan, and they are turning this into regulations as we speak. There was a regulatory hearing, I think, on Wednesday about this specifically. And basically what Boston has done with their carbon footprint is they recognize that buildings are the majority of their carbon footprint as well, and it's not just buildings owned by the municipality, it's all these privately owned buildings in the city. So what they have done is they've established this regulation called BERDO, the Building Emission Reporting Disclosure Ordinance, to try to get building owners to reduce the carbon footprint of their buildings, and now they have put a price on carbon. So it's somewhere around $234 a ton of emissions per year that you have to pay if you don't meet those targets. So those are the regulations that are rolling out right now. And basically what they've established is you have to hit a certain emissions intensity of your buildings over time. If you don't hit those thresholds, you have to pay a fee, and eventually it has to get to zero. So the city has a goal of net zero by 2050, and they're forcing all these building owners to come along with them, essentially. So how does that play out? So we have to look at decarbonizing our existing buildings, so trying to wean them off of fossil fuels, trying to, switch over to electricity and look at more renewable sources to help provide that electricity, whether it's on-site or off-site. And then in terms of what we're doing with new buildings, and I say we, this is everyone in the city of Boston, needs to look at new construction differently. So we're not just going to have to do LEED buildings, we're going to have to do zero net carbon buildings. So from the day that those the doors open of those new buildings, they have to have net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So they may be an all-electric building, but that means you have to either have on-site renewables or some sort of contract for off-site renewable energy to get it to zero right away. This is a sort of a hypothetical here, but I looked at the emissions targets that the city has set and applied it backwards to the campus overall. So they have these emissions intensity targets, and I said, well, what does that mean for overall emissions, like total emissions, total square feet? So if you do it that way, that steep line in the back, that's actually the emissions thresholds that you have to meet. So you can see that in 2025, we're good. 2030, we're still pretty okay. And then once we get to 2035, all of a sudden, the campus emissions in these bars here are above those thresholds. So we really have to start thinking about how we're going to wean the campus off of fossil fuels before that point. And that's something that we're working really hard to do right now. I forgot to mention, so the red is your stationary fuels, your natural gas, and the yellow is electricity again. So this is just sort of forecasting out if we didn't do anything differently from where we are today, what would that look like into the future? So how are we dealing with this? We're continuing to work with the utilities on efficiency. If anyone was on campus last week, which I know it was break, so maybe you weren't, we actually had a team of energy auditors combing every square inch of this campus looking for energy efficiency opportunities, and they uncovered all sorts of interesting things that I'll be able to share in a few months once we get all the findings, but I heard some fun tidbits. So even when you operate your buildings as efficiently as possible, there's always little things that slip through the cracks, or people just open windows because the temperature isn't the way they want it, but they're not reporting it to facilities. Like it's anything like that, right? So we're always looking for those opportunities. And then lastly, the campus master plan that I think you all may have heard about, that is ongoing, and there's a sustainability portion of that. So I really, really want to get the student voice into that piece, right? So when we write the sustainability portion of the campus master plan, what do the students want to see for the future vision of the campus? What should it look like? What should we be thinking about? What are some of those ideas that we can put forward? And I'm hoping that this energy challenge will shake out some of those and just, demonstrate that we have the expertise right here in the room. Let's take advantage of that, and let's elevate that message. So this is my pitch. We need you. And I know I covered a lot from like the region to the campus. I'm trying to make this a little bit more tangible for all of you. We need your help looking for opportunities. Think about your energy use in a typical week. So what can you do to reduce that? What are some outside of the box creative solutions that we haven't talked about yet that you might want to pitch to the campus? And how do we inspire the rest of the campus community to act on this issue? All those little pictures on the bottom, those are actually tools that we have available to you. So we have to work out the process for loaning them to you, but we have thermal imaging cameras. So if you wanted to look for heat loss through leaky windows or cracks in building envelopes and things like that, on a nice cold day, you go out with one of those, you take a picture of the building, and it literally lights up where that heat is being leaking from the building. The next picture is a smart power strip. So we have several of these. I think we have like 20 of these at this point. So those you could set up just in your dorm room, and you have an app that you download, and it'll literally log how much electricity you're using with anything that you plug into that. So if you're curious about plug load and laptops and TVs or anything like that, you could borrow one of those and log it and figure out, how do we optimize this? How do we install smart power strips that shut these down automatically? Are there power settings that maybe we're not taking advantage of? Things like that. We have multimeters, so for those of you who are a little more tech savvy and want to really dive into what's happening, you can check out the electrical load of different pieces of equipment. And then lastly, we actually have a portable solar panel and a little battery system that I have not had a chance to use yet, but I'm dying for an excuse to use that. So if that's something of interest to you, we can talk about that as well. And I wanted to end with a fun little video, so hopefully this will work. Everybody knows the beautiful building that we're in, but people always ask me if they can see what's on the roof. And this is from a student team, I think, over the summer that had done this. Bear with me. So they flew a drone up to the roof of CEIS. You'll notice the white roof. The white roof is actually done intentionally to help reduce heat gain. And there's our solar array that everybody wants to see that you can't see from the ground. So we actually have a lot of data on that as well. So there's a dashboard that's connected to this building that has probably 20 different energy meters, including the solar array. So if you wanted to look at energy use trends in this building, I think we can even do floor by floor and possibly break out plug load versus ventilation. There's a lot of electrical submetering in the building that we haven't taken full advantage of yet as well. All right, so that's it.
Thank you again, Debbie. Thank you for all that amazing information. I thought that was super useful and helpful for this entire challenge. So tonight, it's time to kick it off. The challenge will begin tonight, and it's going to go on until the 23rd at 4 p.m., 23rd of March at 4 p.m. What is the challenge, you ask? Great question. I'm really glad you asked. Did anybody ask? Okay. Tonight, when this challenge starts, your goal is to form teams. When you're in those teams, you will embark on a goal to identify opportunities that Wentworth has to reduce its operational energy usage. Now remember, operational energy usage is the energy that Wentworth uses to support the building's lighting, heating, cooling, ventilation, plug load, things like that, right? Things that we're using all the time here. Identify opportunities where you can reduce those or convert those to green or sustainable sources. On each of the tables, you'll find two things of information. One is a bunch of campus energy data that Debbie has just shared with us, and the second is the challenge defined in more detail. We're going to give you 3 to 4 minutes to read through that really quick, and then ask us any questions that you've got, and then we'll send everyone off to begin their week of development. Does anybody have any questions about the challenge now before you start reading over the material? Great. We'll give it 3 to 4 minutes. We'll check back in, see if anybody has questions. Thank you. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the challenge? We got one. Yeah, really great question. So the format of the 23rd is going to be a presentation/pitch style event where you're going to be coming forward with your team. You've got 5 minutes to present your solution that you've identified, and then present it to kind of everyone else who's in the audience and a select few judges that are going to talk about like the feasibility and kind of go over with your team where you identified the issue and kind of breakdown of everything you've come up with. Anybody else? Wonderful. Honestly, with everything in this challenge, the name of the game is to be creative. Push past the first thing that jumps into your head or explore it a little bit farther. Go with your interests. Like if you're super into gardens and growing stuff, maybe take a look at what vertical gardens inside a building do to your HVAC costs, right? get creative, get excited, and do something that really interests you. If you're looking to join a team, stick around afterwards. I'll hang out by this table over here, and I can help you find a team, put that together. In addition, we're going to send out an email with all of the information you've got on the table, plus a little bit more, so don't worry about memorizing all of it. That's not part of the challenge. You can take it with you if you want, #sustainability. And other than that, like I said, 23rd, we'll be having these presentations at 4 p.m. Get excited, bring your friends, get ready to talk about some cool creative solutions. Last thing we want to do is super shout out to Debbie for coming and being with us tonight. And also thank you to the Sustainability Committee for all of the great work that they do for our campus. And then one last thing, we've got a workshop on the 16th here for public speaking. I know I'm going to it because I need that. So it's at 5 p.m. If anybody would like to come to that, highly encourage you as well. Help you get prepared for this, the 23rd when we all present. If no one else has any questions, we are done for tonight. Thank you all very much for coming. Have a good one. Eat the food, please.